If you feel like Netflix just has a whole lot of nothing to watch lately, here are 10 movies you've likely never seen or heard of just hanging out on Netflix. So this is a pretty eclectic list. We've got things from all across the board here, and like I said, these are lesser known movies, ones that have either not really been recommended or just didn't really get the audience they deserve. This video is sponsored by AG1 by Athletic Greens, but I'll be telling you more about them later in the video. Right now, I want to tell you about my number 10 pick, Beirut. In this movie, Jon Hamm plays a former US diplomat sent to Beirut to try to negotiate for someone's life. This takes place at the peak of the Civil War, and even though it is a lower budget movie, they did bring Beirut to life in a pretty realistic way in this movie, because this is a very realistic spy movie, and it's from some really killer creators. Aside from just Jon Hamm doing a great performance, you've also got Brad Anderson directing. He's more famous for The Machinist and Session 9, two really great little creepy movies, and then Tony Gilroy did the script here. He's most famous for Rogue One, but he also wrote Nightcrawler and Michael Clayton, so a fantastic writer, and the movie itself is very well written, well acted, and has some really nail-biting sequences in it. My number 9 pick comes from Spain. You can watch it with subtitles, or there's a pretty decent dubbed version. This one is technically sci-fi and actually has a lot in common with Back to the Future in its basic setup. Thematically, it's a very different type of movie, so don't expect a fun romp with this one. In this movie, a woman is transported basically to an entirely different timeline in life during a lightning storm. And if that sounds a little whack, I will say Mirage does deliver the premise pretty well. It's fairly straightforward, and it really is just the delivery device for this incredibly complicated story that again kind of doubles back on itself and has a little bit in common with the setup for Back to the Future. But this is much more of a tearjerker. It's a very emotional ride, and there are a lot of twists and turns. If any of that tickles your fancy, then Mirage is a really interesting little indie sci-fi flick, again, from Spain. My next pick is the first of only 3 Netflix original movies on this list. It comes from Germany. There's a German language version and an even more solid dubbed version. In fact, I kind of recommend checking this movie out on the dubbed version because not only is it not bad, there's so much chaos in Blood Red Sky that it will be hard to keep up with the subtitles.
Ladies and gentlemen, as you can see, we have control of the plane. We want this operation of ours to go off without a hitch. If not, use your imaginations.
In this movie, an overnight flight is hijacked, so there is a plane being hijacked for the bulk of this movie. But in this movie, when the hijackers take over, they learn that one of the passengers is not only not human, they're a bloodthirsty vampire. What I really liked about Blood Red Sky is it's unlike most vampire movies. I mean, that is an oversaturated genre, but Blood Red Sky really sticks out, especially for a Netflix original. If you were a fan of the way the zombies behaved and the way they were delivered in 30 Days of Night, then you have to watch Blood Red Sky. But if you just want to watch a wild hijacking movie with a lot of blood and biting in it, then definitely check it out as well. My next pick is another sci-fi movie from Spain, but the reason I have 2 on this list is because this next one is one of the most interesting Netflix originals I've ever seen, The Platform. Now, the setup for this is very simple. A man wakes up in a cell with only one roommate, and every day, once a day, this giant platform lowers and they're able to eat anything that they want. The catch is that they're eating the leftovers from the level above, and there seem to be endless levels in this prison structure that they're in. And the platform makes incredible use of that really pretty simple setup. I mean, the metaphor here is kind of straight down the middle, is pretty obvious, but they play with it, they dance with it a bit. It does get quite confusing, and even though I think they maybe missed when they reached for that brass ring, they got big points for me for reaching for it, and overall, I've seen this more than once, and it is a wild ride, again, especially for a Netflix original sci-fi movie. They're rarely this good. And then my next pick is one of the newer movies on this list, if not the newest. It just came out last year and actually had a pretty good little theatrical run, even though it's a smaller movie, Emily the Criminal.
In the next hour, you will make 200 cash, but you will have to do something illegal. You won't be in danger, but you will be breaking the law.
Yo, you gonna pay for that?
Sorry?
Now in this one, Aubrey Plaza, which I'm just a big fan of her, I always like what she does, but she plays very against type in this movie, and she's playing someone who resorts to credit card fraud in order to get by. She's mostly known for her comedic performances. Her performance here is not only good, but it's very, very understated. She actually has very few lines in this movie. She only really speaks when she needs to, but it's so well directed that that doesn't matter. Most of the storytelling happens either visually with the way that it's shot or subtleties in Aubrey Plaza's performance. If you like more understated crime movies, Emily the Criminal is one of the better new ones I've seen in the last few years, for sure. And before talking about the top 5 on this list, I do want to tell you about today's sponsor, AG1 by Athletic Greens. And this is a product I've been using for well over a year now. I drink a glass of AG1 every day as kind of part of my overall wellness regimen. But AG1 is a convenient powder that you mix into an 8-ounce glass of water, and it is packed to the gills with vitamins, minerals, probiotics, and adaptogens. So as I approach 40, I've spent the last few years slowly building more muscle than I've ever had, and to do that, I've got to eat a lot of protein. What I love about AG1 is it lets me get all the benefits of a rich leafy green diet without having to eat gobs and gobs of spinach and kale and other greens. And AG1 helps support a healthy immune system. I mean, yes, it's anecdotal evidence, but I've been taking AG1 for a year and I've not been sick at all in the last year. And I've had some close calls. And if you use the link in the description below to order, AG1's gonna send you a free gift of vitamin D3 and K2, which is gonna further support your immune system, and it is a year's supply of vitamin D3 and K2, plus 5 travel packs of AG1. But when you order, you do get all of this stuff. You get the big pack of AG1, this nice metal tin for storing it in the fridge, a nice bottle, the scoop, the whole thing, plus that free gift of vitamin D3 and K2 and some additional travel packs. It is a fantastic deal. But speaking of fantastic stuff, let's talk about the rest of the movies on this list. All right, the last sci-fi pick on this list is a doozy, and it actually comes from Canada, and it was a very low budget movie considering how many effects they packed into Code 8.
How do you want to live in this life? Let's go. Hide our powers. Everybody on the ground! If you see something that you want, take it.
Now, I have been advocating for this movie for the past few years. I absolutely love it, especially for something done on a lower budget. In fact, there is a short film, you can watch it right here on YouTube, called Code 8 that this movie was then based on because the short was successful. I will put a link to that short film in the top pinned comment along with the full list of all the movies discussed in this video. But Code 8 takes place in a future where some humans have started to develop powers very much like X-Men, yet there's this elite robotic police force that keeps them in check and sort of subjugates them, and there's quite a bit of crime that goes on in this. Everyone's got these different powers, and considering I've seen the superhero thing tried from every single angle imaginable, Code 8's angle is not mind-blowing, but it is incredibly well delivered and is just a sharp superhero movie, again, done on a microscopic budget compared to what most superhero movies are done on. And I think the story gets delivered better, and ultimately it is a more interesting experience for me than most of the superhero stuff getting released these days. Jessica Chastain seems to be in a new movie every single month, and a lot of them, in fact, most of them are quite good. But one of the more overlooked ones she's done in the last few years has gotta be Molly's Game.
I'm getting that you don't think much of me, but what if every single one of your ill-informed, unsophisticated opinions about me were wrong?
Be amazed.
Now, this is based on a true story, and not only does Jessica Chastain just kill it in this role, this was actually written and directed by Aaron Sorkin. It's also based on a book by the real Molly Bloom, who was an Olympic athlete who ended up running an exclusive poker game where a lot of really powerful people bet lots of money. Idris Elba plays her lawyer. He's great in this as well. In fact, the whole supporting cast is fantastic. Michael Cera even has a great little role playing like a little Hollywood celebrity kind of guy in these poker games. Aaron Sorkin is most famous for his incredible dialogue, and Molly's Game delivers on that, but he also really, I think, directed the hell out of this thing. I mean, story-wise, the movie delivers Molly Bloom's story incredibly well, and it's just a very interesting crime movie that has kind of a different flavor than most other movies like it. But speaking of flavor, if you want to watch something that just has a completely different flavor from anything you've likely ever seen, then check out Bardo, False Chronicle of a Handful of Truths. Now, the movie itself is artsier than that title, if you can believe that. And this is directed by Alejandro Iñárritu, who's most famous for directing movies like The Revenant with DiCaprio, Babel, and Birdman. And I would say Bardo is most closely related to Birdman. In fact, if you were a big fan of the movie Birdman, I honestly think there is a very slim chance you will not love Bardo. Now, they speak Spanish in this movie as well, but it comes from Mexico, and is ultimately kind of about Mexico, a sense of national pride, things like that. But really, what you get with this movie is a dream. A man's dream is the best way that I can describe it. What I love about it is not only is the cinematography fantastic, which is always the case with his movies, but this feels like Michel Gondry's work, something like Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. I mean, the character you're following just keeps transitioning into these new experiences very much like a dream. And honestly, this movie's quite exhausting. It's over 2 hours, and there's so much going on in it, and it changes so dramatically from scene to scene. I felt exhausted early on. I thought it's at least an hour into this movie, and it was only 30 minutes in. That said, I hung with it. It still continued to exhaust me, but I could not pry myself away from it. It was so interesting, and then what's so great about it is that even though it's this wild art house ride, it does go somewhere. It ultimately kind of sticks the landing, which is so rarely the case with art films like these. I think they rarely even try to stick the landing with movies like this, but Bardo did it, and it was one of the more unique viewing experiences I've ever had watching a Netflix original. I will say though, if you typically do not like art house films, you're probably going to have a hard time getting into this one, but it may be worth trying for just a few minutes because this one has got some magic moments in it. Okay, now I do have a funny movie on this list that comes from New Zealand, and I think just appeals to a really broad audience. And I say that not just because this is incredibly well reviewed, but this is a movie I've showed to different people over the years, and everyone ended up loving The Hunt for the Wilderpeople.
I'll never stop running.
Yeah, and I'll never stop chasing you. I'm relentless. I'm like the Terminator.
I'm more like Terminator than you.
I said it first, you're more like Sarah Connor. In the first movie too, before she could do chin-ups.
This is from writer-director Taika Waititi, who's most famous for movies like Jojo Rabbit, Thor Ragnarok, and What We Do in the Shadows, and I do think Hunt for the Wilderpeople is far and away his best film. In this movie, a troubled youth runs out into the bush, and his adopted father, a man played by Sam Neill, has to go out after him, and they end up getting lost out in the bush for quite a while. Julian Dennison plays the young man, and he makes this movie work. I mean, it's well written, it's well directed, beautiful scenery, and some really funny dialogue, but Julian's performance carries this thing to another level, and it really is next level stuff, especially for a young man of his age. He's been in a few other things. I've yet to see him get a part nearly as good as this one, but I'm telling you, this is just pure gold. It's got tense moments, it's full of heart, and it'll make you laugh multiple times from scene to scene, unless, I don't know, you read the New Yorker for laughs. And then I recently raved about my number one pick on my list of everything coming to Netflix this January, The Raid 2. Now, not only did I rave about this movie, I called it one of, if not the greatest action movie of the 21st century so far, and even if it's not that, it's certainly the most underrated. This is the sequel to The Raid Redemption, but you do not have to see it first, even though I highly recommend checking it out. Whereas that was really just this all-out action movie with really fantastic action. There's equally fantastic action in The Raid 2, but it is also an epic gangster movie. This was filmed and takes place in Indonesia and is got some beautiful cinematography, especially for a movie of its kind, but my goodness, is the violence brutal in this movie. And it's not just brutal in a off-putting way, even though it can be that multiple times during the movie, but it's also wildly entertaining the way that it was written and the way that it was shot. It's over the top, the fight scenes go on for exhausting amounts of time, but every single stitch of those action sequences is perfectly executed. If you are a fan of classic John Woo movies like Hard Boiled, the Raid series is the new evolution in that genre. I absolutely love these things. They pack in every kind of action you could want in a movie, including some stuff you've never seen before. If that sounds like you, or you're a longtime subscriber and you tend to like a lot of the same things as me, trust me, this is gonna be one of your new favorite movies. But that is the list. I put out videos like this every single week, so if you want some more recommendations, just watch a couple of recent episodes on the channel page. But I will keep making these videos as long as you keep watching them. Thanks for checking out this special Netflix episode, and you will see me on the next one.